everybody. Happy Thursday. I hope everyone is having a wonderful week. And happy Veterans Day. So, to all those that serve and have served, we thank you for your service. And so, we're kicking off another author's conversation with Stories of a Colorful World. So, I am Vanessa Mitchell, along with Kanika Mobley. And together, we are the co founders of Stories of a Colorful World. So if this is your first time joining us for an author conversation, welcome. And for those returning, welcome back. And even for those who are new to Stories of a Colorful World, we are an online children's bookstore. And we focus on carrying children's books that feature BIPOC characters or Black, Indigenous people of color by authors from those same diverse groups. And Kanika and I feel very strongly that every child deserves to see themselves in the books that they read. And so that's why we are intentional about carrying children's books that feature BIPOC authors written by BIPOC characters written by BIPOC authors. And there's still a lack of diversity in children's books. So we're going to continue to be intentional and increase access to these books. But we also use our Authors Conversations platform to highlight and amplify and promote BIPOC authors, so the authors of the books that we carry. And tonight, we have the honor and pleasure of speaking with the award-winning author and poet, Nikki Grimes. And Nikki has written numerous children's books and young adult books, including Garvey's Choice, Poems in the Attic, and Bronx Masquerade. So welcome, Nikki, and thank you so much for accepting our invitation tonight.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yes. So we'll kick it off and maybe start at the beginning. And I'll just ask, so what role did reading and writing play in your life as a child?
Oh, they were my survival tools. I wouldn't be here without reading and writing. I crawled into books and into stories to escape my life and to find kernels of hope. And writing for me for the first, probably, I don't know, third of my life at least, was all about survival. It was the way I processed things. It was the way I got things off my chest. When I needed to talk about something or something was bothering me, I went to the page. And I was so fortunate that I discovered the alchemy of words on paper very early in life. And so I was constantly filling spiral notebooks with poems and stories and thoughts. And yeah, that was my go-to. And that really was what helped to keep me sane through the early part of my life. It wasn't until maybe the end of middle school, early high school, that I started thinking about writing as a possible career. Because up till then, it was just about, this is what I need to do to get over.
Yeah.
And then I started thinking, books. Okay. I read them. Maybe I should write them. And I started, that pursuit at that point. So yeah.
Nice. So I think I read somewhere that you were an avid reader as a child. And so were there any specific books that you were connected to as a child?
No, if it was nailed down, I was reading it. And that became really a good thing later on because I read across genres. I read, fantasies, I read fairy tales, I read nonfiction, fiction, I read just everything. Detective stories, Nordic tales, African folk tales. I read everything. And I'm so glad that I had that experience because I continue to do that. And I think that really helped me to grow in my craft, to be exposed to so many different genres and not to be stuck in one or the other. So that worked out just fine.
So was the love of poetry, did that start at the same time as you were reading and writing, or when did the love of poetry start?
That started with the love of language. I was just fascinated with words even before I started writing. Just the idea that one word could mean many different things. And so I would play all kinds of word games and jumbles and puzzles, and I'd make up my own games, and I'd go to the dictionary and, close my eyes and turn the pages and pick out a word, and boom, like figure out how many ways I could use that word. And then I'd go to the next word. And just the idea that someone could write something funny and thousands of miles away, someone else could read it and laugh was such a powerful idea to me. So I was always sort of chasing that before I even thought about poetry. And poetry at its base is wordplay. So I was moving in that direction without even being able to articulate it. And then I actually started writing discovered poetry, again, not really even knowing what I was doing, when I was 6. And as I, was introduced to it in school, in the classroom, I started having names for what I was doing. Oh, that's what that is. Okay. But I just came to it organically.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So.
I love that. So you bring the characters that you create within your books are like so dynamic and are so relatable for so many people. So how much of your experiences do you bring into your work?
Well, I certainly bring my own experiences, but I'm also, like most writers, a bit of a spy. I'm always listening to conversations around me, picking up snippets, noticing the gestures of a person, and I'm like, ooh, that's interesting. So jotting it down, we're just not safe, really. I was, taking in stuff. But, and then also I'm blending in stories from my own experiences, the experiences of people around me, my, friends, my family, people that I get to study all the time. So, no one was ever safe. Not my friends, not my aunties, not the white-haired ladies, blue-haired ladies at church. Everybody ended up in the book sooner or later, So my warning was, if you have a friend who's a writer, be on your guard. You will end up in our stories. So just watch yourself.
I love it.
So has anyone ever read the book and say, wait a minute, is that me?
Well, that's the funny thing. People really don't see themselves as they are.
Okay.
So most often they don't even recognize themselves in the stories. And that just cracks me up. I had an editor who was working on a book in which one of the characters was based on her and the story she had told me about her own childhood. I don't think she's figured it out yet. I was like, thank you.
Wow.
Funny.
But people tend not to see themselves. I mean, my oldest friend, because some of the stories were sort of close to the bone, she's like, I remember that, But many times people just don't even recognize themselves, which I get a chuckle.
So you talked about as a child kind of thinking about books and all types of books and being able to move from different genres. And so we also noticed that in like your collection of books that, you write anything from picture books all the way through, young adult. Like, do you come with those books with the same kind of like creative process, or how does your process change across different types of books?
I suppose, I mean, they're a little bit different from book to book. Obviously, if I'm doing nonfiction, there's far more research involved, but there's a fair amount of research involved with fiction as well, for that matter. Just not as intense. If I'm writing like a novel in verse, I have a pretty consistent pattern. But if it's a collection of poetry, that's not the same process at all. So yeah, it varies. It varies. The things that are consistent is that I will start with the thing that is easiest and work up to the most difficult. And by doing that, I don't get stuck anywhere. I'm able to just sort of build my momentum. And I find that works for both writing, and it especially works for revision, where you can easily feel overwhelmed. I'm like, no, especially when you have an editor like I do who does like a 16-page editorial letter, single spaced. Yeah. And you're like,
wow.
Okay.
Wow.
So I kind of give myself the first day to sort of get over that, because my initial response the first day of receiving such a letter is, "Are you kidding me? You want me to do what?" So I have to kind of get that out of my system. And then the next day I pick it up again and it's like, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I can see that. Don't agree with that though, But what helps me to be able to do the work, no matter how mammoth it is just to know it's an elephant. You have to just do it one piece at a time. And I just start out with whatever is easiest, and I just kind of move up the chain. So by the time I get to what's most difficult, I'm ready to do it, and I'm okay.
Nice.
So do you know going into it what type of book you're going to write? Do you start with the theme and then determine what direction, or start with a character in mind?
Most often I have a character in mind, and I might have like a germ of a story, but I'm a character-driven writer, so character is always most important for me. I do a character sketch, I develop the backstory, I figure out what the quirks are of my character, so that by the time I put them on the page, I know how they're going to respond to different stimuli. And often the character will sort of dictate the story I write about them. And they also will give me pushback if I'm writing dialogue. I mean, it's from time to time a character will say, "I'm not going to say that." It's just like, are you kidding me? So it's a funny kind of a process. But yeah, the character is most important to me. So I spend a lot of time on that, and then slowly start to work on sort of the skeleton of the story. I don't do copious outlines, but I do sketch out what I call a scenario for each narrative. Sort of just so I have a basic idea of what's going to happen in that narrative. Who the speaker is, and just a general feel of it. Because at the end of the day, even if I'm writing a novel in verse, it is first and foremost a novel. It is a story, and it has to work on the level of story. Poetry comes way after that, So I make sure I have my story locked in, and then I can begin to craft whatever the poetry is, if it's free verse or tanka or whatever, golden shovel, whatever the form is going to be. But I have to lock in story. But character is key, because if you don't care about the character, you don't care about the story. And I'm looking always to make an emotional connection with my reader, and you do that through the character. So.
And have you ever been surprised about, maybe thought you started somewhere and thought this is where it was going to end, and then somehow along the way, the story ended up in a different place than you had initially thought?
I'm always surprised. it almost never ends the way I think it's going to end.
Wow.
And sometimes the ending will change, 3, 4, 5 times before I, completely nail it. So I have an idea going in. I, think this is the way it's going to be. But yeah, I'm frequently surprised. I'm surprised by characters who show up who I didn't plan to put in the story, and then all of a sudden they're important, and they've sort of taken over an aspect of the story, and I'm like, where did you come from? Didn't even know. So there are always surprises along the way, and I think that's one of the things that keeps me excited, and it keeps it fresh. And my editors are guilty of getting me into this kind of trouble anyway. When I wrote Garvey's Choice, it was initially it was a story just about Garvey dealing with his weight issues. I wrote it because I'd asked myself, I'll go on these reading jags, and I'd been in a Tonka reading jag for a while. And in the middle of it, I was like, maybe it would be possible to write a novel all in Tonka. So then the only way to get the answer to that was to try to do it. And I think a lot about body image, and it occurred to me that while I was seeing, a book now and then dealing with body image from a girl's perspective, I wasn't seeing anything from a boy's, and I know boys who were dealing with that. So I'm like, okay, that's what the story is about. Give it to the first draft to my editor, and she says, yeah, but weight isn't the only thing that there is about this character. Well, what else is he into? What is he about? And then she asks this one question. There's always like one question that takes me down a rabbit hole. And she said, why does he overeat in the first place? And of course, my answer was the same as always. I don't know. But then it's in my head and I've got to figure it out. And so it led me to his relationship with his father, and the fact that his father, wants to relate to him through sports and athletics, and Garvey's not interested in that, and that whole disconnect. And that ends up being the heart of the story. And before she asked me that question, it didn't even exist.
Right.
With, let's see, Words with Wings, I gave her a story that was a picture book manuscript. It was completely beautiful picture book manuscript. Everyone agreed it was a lovely picture book manuscript. But there's more. We can just see more. What about a novel? I'm like, oh, great. Once again, I come to you with a finished book and you say, this is a great beginning, And so the question for that book was, and because it's about a girl who daydreams, right? Why did she start daydreaming? I don't know. And I started thinking about, and it's about her family and the breakup of the, parents and all this. And so she starts to, and also her father's like a dreamer. And so, so there's this whole element that comes in that didn't exist before. And of course, now I can't even imagine the story without it. So she's, it's her fault.
Blame it on the editor.
Yeah. Yeah, so there are always surprises, and I love that about the work.
I love how you bring like that the character and create those characters and that tell stories that are relatable and talk about issues that kids can relate to and deal with. Is there a way that you think about it as you're telling the story in terms of like poetry or prose? Because I know we have a few books that are written in verse, and I feel like we always kind of have to sell those books to people, you know, they're amazing stories, but then there's always sometimes people's reluctance to try out poetry, to try out stories written in verse. What would you say to people who I wouldn't say like don't see it as a story, because they are full stories, but like they may have reluctance to try stories that are written in verse because they feel
one of the reasons novels in verse have taken off in recent years as a subgenre is the fact that especially reluctant readers come to a book like that and they see all that white space and they're seduced by it. And they immediately think, well, I could read that. Because, you know, like, well, there aren't as many words.
Right.
And of course, very often the stories are every bit as complex.
Absolutely.
And, you know, have as much emotional depth as any work in prose. But they're not intimidated by the form, and so they'll try it. And many times there are kids for whom that is the first novel they've read cover to cover. And then once they've had it, they want more. Yeah. So so there is every reason to give it a try and to share it with young readers, because once they get hooked on it, oh my gosh, they're hooked on it and they want more and they want more. And it becomes a gateway to their reading in general. Right. Because once they become avid readers, they don't stop with novels in verse. Right. They're then open to other genres as well.
Right.
So yeah.
So in your books, you touch on a lot of tough topics. Like we talked about obesity in one book, and I know you've got others that touch on bullying and loss and grief.
Yeah.
Right. And these may be tough topics for children, but what is your process, or how do you make the books relatable to children, right? So that you can speak to them, not as an adult, but on a level that they can understand and that helps them process through, you know, if they're going through similar experiences.
Well, part of my process is I look to climb into the skin of my characters and look at the world through their eyes. See things the way they see, the same way you would get down on a floor to play with a toddler, you know, so that you're at the same level. That's what I'm doing when I write, is just climbing into their skin to look at the world through their eyes. And you know, to make sure I stay in touch with that, I'm around children. You know, I don't have any children of my own, but I've got everybody else's. My friends' kids, and I'm auntie to lots of children, you know, that kind of thing. And I watch them, I listen to them, I study them. If I'm working on a character from a people group that isn't my own, I will also go to film and find, you know, and pick up things, nuances and things that I'll pay attention to, and that will help me also to pay attention to the music of their speech, as well as, you know, other cultural details that I want to pick up to make sure the story is authentic and the representation is authentic, as well, obviously, as reading, you know, other books, right. You know, books by other people on those subjects, or about those, you know, or featuring that group of people or that age group. I have to be really careful if I'm working on a picture book to only read picture books. If I'm working on middle grade, to only read middle grade, and not to cross genres either, because I work in so many genres. If I'm working on poetry and I suddenly start reading essays, then I start writing essays, you know, or short stories or whatever it is. So I've learned I can't do that. I have to, you know, read in the genre that I'm working on, so that I don't get distracted more than usual. there are always distractions, but yeah, I have to really be careful about that. So, yeah.
I love that. So you were mentored by James Baldwin.
Yeah, not too shabby.
and studied under Nikki Giovanni. So like, how did those experiences kind of shape your career in later work?
Well, not so much studied under Giovanni, but we were on the same workshop, and I hung out. I was sort of with Giovanni and Sonia Sanchez and Jane Cortez and Barbara Masakela. I was the kid in the group. Tony Gay Bombara. I was like, I don't know, 18, 19, whatever. I was the kid that hung around with them. And I started doing poetry on the college circuit. And so I would be on the stage with them or sharing the stage with them, doing various programs. And, you know, I'm a sponge. I'm picking up everything. I'm listening. I'm paying attention, picking up rhythms. But everything sort of started for me with Baldwin. I was 17 when I met him. And I knew about him because I had a fabulous high school English teacher who wanted to make sure I knew authors that I should know about. And so she would sneak a book every now and then into my book bag, and I would discover it when I got home, like buried treasure. And one of those books was by Baldwin. She wanted me to know who he was. And so, you know, 16, 17, I'm reading Baldwin and just falling in love with his work. I'm like, oh, you know. And he was in the States for about a year and a half. Because he was in Paris and then he left, came home for about a year and a half. And I met him during that time. And one day he was speaking it was the second memorial, second year after Malcolm X was killed. And he was speaking at a memorial at a high school in Harlem, and it was a school I could get to. And so, and I probably played hooky to do it now that I'm thinking. It's like, there was school that day, right? Anyway, I went, sat in the front row, had my little spiral notebook, which I carried with me everywhere with my poetry in it, right? Sat in the front row so I could hear everything that he said. And when he got off the platform, he left the auditorium. And so I gathered up my stuff and I ran after him. And I'm running through the school hall. Mr. Baldwin, can I speak to you for a minute? Mr. Baldwin. And he stops. I'm all out of breath. I'm like, hi. You know, I introduce myself and I'm a writer too. And, you know, could you read my work and tell me what you think? So he takes the notebook from me and he reads it cover to cover. And then he turns it over on the back and he writes his name and his address and his phone number, and he gives it back to me and he says, you call me. And I did. Now, this is something you would do at 17.
Right.
As an adult, I would hardly have said hello to the man. But I was 17. Okay? It did not occur to me to be afraid or medicine or any of that stuff. And I was like, I'm a writer too. Read my work. And so I spent about a year and a half with him, and it was really informal. You know, I hung out at his house. He would talk to me about the importance of mastering your craft, mastering your tools, and to not compromise in the area of your giftedness. So you compromise somewhere else, but not when it comes to your writing. And talked about the importance of being able to look in the mirror and like who you saw, and make decisions about your work that would influence that would allow you to like who you saw in the mirror.
Mhm.
And of course, just, yeah, the whole importance of pursuing your craft and continuing to grow, all those sorts of things, which obviously will impact me for the rest of my life. You know, they were all great lessons. So those two people, actually, my teacher, who was the first teacher I ever had, who did not give me an A+ on a paper, on the first paper I wrote for her, but told me in no uncertain terms, if you want an A from me, Miss Grimes, you will have to dig deep and do the very best writing of which you are capable. Because her thing was, well, yeah, these other kids, yes, I give them an A. They are doing their best. You're not doing your best. You know, you're like, you're kind of coasting because you've got a talent here. And so she pushed me, and that has made all the difference. I continue to raise the bar on myself all the time. I'm constantly, you know, trying things I've never tried, and you know, tweaking things to the nth degree to make sure they're as good as they can be at the moment. Understanding that, you know, in a year I'll look back and I will be able to make it better at that point in time. But to make it the very best that it can be at that moment. So between those two people, I sort of got the foundation for my work ethic. Yeah.
That is such a cool story. That is such an absolutely cool story. So we ask each of the authors that comes to our conversation, what does diversity in children's books and in children's literature mean to you?
Oh my gosh, it's everything. You have to be it in order to see it. We have to see it in order to be it, I think, as the saying goes. We need to see ourselves to be able to imagine what's possible. And we're only at the beginning of that journey in this country. I am continually discovering new people groups, being made aware of new people groups that aren't represented. In the last year, what was it? Actually, over the summer, I worked on my my estate plan, my literary estate, digital estate, all those sorts of things. And in the process, I started going through my files to find and to identify literary product so that people can find it easily, right? And in the process of doing that, and also to thin out the files, because I just got too much stuff in there. But before you can throw anything away, you have to read it. So I'm reading all this stuff, and I'm finding stories I forgot about, you know, because out of sight, out of mind with me. I'm always going on to whatever the next thing is. And I found, one of the things I found was a story that was about a child who was Choctaw and African American. It's like, where did this character come from? And then I remembered when I was writing Talking About Bessie, I noted that her father was Choctaw, and I filed that away, right? And so I come across this story, and it occurs to me, because the landscape has changed so much, we're now talking about own voices and all of that, that I might not even have the right to write this story. So I get in touch with a friend of mine who's Native American, and I like, what do I do with this? You know, and she reads it, and she has a couple of ideas, and one is that I collaborate with a Choctaw author. Great. So we started working on a book, which I'm so excited about. But the story that I started off with completely changed as we began to work together and do research, because I began to realize there's a more important story here. And that's the fact that there are very few, if any, picture books featuring Afro-Indigenous children. I was like, yep. what?
Yep.
You know, and so my friend is talking about, Native Blacks and, Afro-Indigenous, and I'm like, I haven't even heard these terms before. Of course, you start thinking about it, I'm like, well, of course that makes sense.
Yep.
And of course, there are two groups, two large groups. There are those who intermarried between, African Americans and Native Americans. And there's also the group that became part of the individual nations through slavery after they were freed. Those tribes made them officially part of that nation. And so that's a whole other set of people. And I'm like, and this is all over the country and all over the Americas, I'm sure, right? And I'm thinking, have I ever even seen a book, like one picture book, that got into that, that expressed that or acknowledged that group? So that got me really excited. Like, okay, this is something I can definitely, I need to get into. And I feel so honored that I get to do that. I get to be part of that. But it also made me start thinking about what other groups there are. And so people are talking about, Afro-Asian and, this other group. I'm like, dang, they're just so many that still need representation. So we're only at the beginning of this process. I love how people say, oh, enough diversity. I'm like, no, we're just getting going.
Right.
Yep.
We're not even, we just tipped that,
Yeah.
made a small dent in it.
Right.
Tiny.
Like that's so exciting to hear you speak about that, because I know in like the work we do in trying to find books from diverse authors, even the percentage of books that are published by Indigenous people is minuscule. Like it is minuscule. So to even think of a set of that, and where do kids get to see themselves and their experiences? Because we're just getting to the point where we're even acknowledging like Afro-Latino.
Yeah, like that's a thing.
Yes. Right. Absolutely. So have you, in the span of your career, like have you noticed a difference in, say, like publishers' responses to your work from like when you first started versus like now?
Yeah, they're much more open to it. You still constantly have to push, especially if you are intent on writing in an area that we're not known for. I've really pushed to write books on nature themes. That might sound weird, but it's really hard to do. It's taken me years to get to the place where I could, just sort of pry that door open to get to do it, which I'm really excited about. It's like Black folks engage with nature all the time. Why don't we ever see that in books? No, we're in this little box. We're all urban, we all live in the inner city. We're all, we're broke. There's no middle class. None. So we're still pushing to get outside of the boxes people have created for us. And so whenever I'm doing something new, and I'm always doing something new, I have to push for it.
Yeah.
That's okay. I don't mind pushing. I can push.
Absolutely.
But that's really what we have to do, because nobody's going to kick the door open for us. We have to do it.
Yeah.
So.
And I think for Kanika and I, that's one of the reasons why, as we've cultivated who we are, today, which is not necessarily where we started. And we had to really think about who we wanted to be and what books we wanted to represent. I mean, showing diverse images of BIPOC characters is important, right? Because we're not monolithic. We're not sort of a one-trick pony.
Right.
We're not in a box. There's lots of things that, we do and in different environments that we're in. And so it's important to show that, for children as well. So I absolutely love that. I absolutely love that. So what would your advice be to up and coming authors, new authors as they go on this journey?
Don't write yourself into a box. For starters. If you want to explore a genre that you haven't seen, or people explore, do it, go there. Fantasy, science fiction. I'm excited when I see some of us starting to explore science fiction because we just haven't, seen that. For sure, to do that. I also always encourage writers to explore many different genres. You're going to settle on one or the other that you feel comfortable with, but every genre has something to teach you if it's written well. And you take something from it and incorporate it into your own work to make it richer. So I encourage that. But yeah, you just have to be deaf to the voices that would limit you and tell you what you can't do or who you're not. If I had paid attention to the multitude of people who told me, don't write poetry, poetry doesn't sell, I would have no career to speak of. But with that, whenever I got that advice, I let it go in one ear and out the other and continue to write the next collection of poetry. So yeah, you know yourself, you know what you're good at, what you're drawn to, what your vision is. Trust your own vision. Trust that. Make it work, do the work so that, the story is strong, your characters are strong and all that, but follow your own vision, trust your own vision of who you are. Don't let somebody else tell you who you are. They'll try, honey.
They will try. They definitely will try. I think in that vein, like really thinking about like today, we're seeing so much pushback on books, and I feel like we were just starting to get a foothold into understanding that kids need to see mirrors of themselves. They need to see visions of, in their media of other kids that look like them, that have an authentic voice like them. And also important for other people to see. And so we were making our way into the schools where kids are accessing the books, where, the curriculum should be designed to support the kids that it's supposed to be supporting. But now we're seeing that pushback and saying, wait, do that at home, not here.
Yeah. Yes. It's scary to me. A single parent will come and say, I don't want children reading this book because this book makes my child uncomfortable. First of all, I don't care about your discomfort.
Right.
And books are supposed to make you feel something.
Right.
If that's discomfort, that's not a bad thing. But, if you're going to make a decision for your own child, have at it. I'm sorry for the kid, but, it's your child. So you get to choose what they read, what they don't read until they're old enough to make those choices on their own. But the audacity of telling us you're going to make that choice for every child in your school district? No, that's not working. That's not working for me. So there is a sort of wholesale pushback right now And it's disturbing on a lot of levels. There is, of course, the obvious that children who need the books are losing access to them. I love, however, that the librarians in each state are fighting back big time. They're, saying, "Oh, is that book banned? Fine, I want 10 of those."
Mhm.
And I'm hearing a lot of that. But what disturbs me is that too much of this is happening sort of undercover, and we are so distracted with, COVID and Afghanistan and just all of these things that are going on in our world that are pulling our attention, that a lot of us are missing this movement that's happening across the country, where people are joining school districts with the single intent of controlling what books are made available. And they're going in and targeting books for removal. And now there's even a pair in Virginia who are not only, targeting books, but who decided, we need to burn those books so that our community knows that we're taking care of the bad books. And I'm like, oh my God, you do realize that's what the Nazis did, right? You are making those connections. Maybe you're not. And I think too many of us are missing that this is happening and the degree to which it's happening. Guy in Texas who asked for, he made up a list of 850 books. Mind you, he doesn't even care about literacy.
Right.
He's doing this because it will help him get elected.
Right.
But no matter the reason, this is something with a potential for great damage. And so we need to be on top of this and pushing back and speaking up and speaking out about it, so that those decisions can be overturned.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think one of the things that we're seeing now too is just that like kids are pushing back.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was particularly happy about, the kids in Pennsylvania who were able to reverse the ban.
Yes.
And we're seeing they are having the voice because they are seeing many more books that reflect them or that they are connected to.
Yeah. Well, I was really excited when I found out about a group in Leander, Texas, where Ordinary Hazards was pulled. The students formed a banned book reading club. It's like, okay, let's make up our own list of books that we're going to read now. I was like, you go.
Absolutely.
And librarians, they're just fierce creatures anyway. I love them. Are fighting back in their own ways. But yeah, this is something we absolutely need to be on top of. This is not something that needs to be going on in a democracy at all. Yeah.
In 2021.
Right. I was just going to say in 2021, this is happening. Yeah. There's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of work to be done in the future. And I know, Nikki, we're close to 8:00. We could probably go on. We could probably go on all evening, but we certainly want to be respectful of your time. But we do want to hear, because you said you're always working on something new. So we do want to hear about what you might be working on and what we can expect from you in the future.
Well, I told you about one of the books, one with featuring an Afro-Indigenous character. I don't have a date from when that's going to come out, but I have a third book in the series of early readers. I had Bedtime for Sweet Creatures and then Off to See the Sea. And the third one is Playtime for Restless Rascals.
Oh, nice.
Which will be out, I think that's out sometime next year. I'm working on a new novel about Garvey, called Garvey in the Dark, and it's set against the pandemic.
Mm.
And that's scheduled for fall of 22. I'm also working on a graphic novel adaptation of Garvey's Choice.
Ooh.
Yeah, because I want to step my toe into that.
Wow.
Because I'm just crazy. So give that a shot.
Hey, you said you have to try all genres, right? You have to try it all.
Gotta try it. So that's happening. I have on the nature theme a book about quiet. Oh my gosh. A Cup of Quiet. Grandma's Cup of Quiet? Yes. And about a grandmother and child who are learning about and pursuing and exploring the quiet to be found in nature. So that's in the works. That's enough.
You're quite busy. You are quite busy.
They're doing a lot of anthologies. A lot of anthology projects have been coming up the last year and a half. So really was excited to be in I Sing the Body, which is an anthology dealing with body image for a YA audience. And also actually have the idea for the anthology Recognize, edited by Wade and Cheryl Hudson. Because like so many other creatives, I was struggling with wanting to do something to support Black Lives Matter and also just to address, some of what was going on. And I knew that there would be other people who felt the same way. And so I shared this idea with them, and they started contacting other creatives, and we ended up with this gorgeous anthology called Recognize. And this is one of the last works of art by Floyd.
Yes.
The cover.
Wow.
Just phenomenal. So that's something definitely to look for, and that's already out.
Yes.
So yeah, there are a few other anthology projects in the works. So I'm not getting bored anytime soon. I keep talking about slowing down, and my friends say, "Yeah, but there's no evidence of it."
Right. I understand that. I understand that you can't say it because then when you say it, there are other things that come into your life. So I found.
It has time. Okay, here.
Exactly.
Okay.
So you can't even think it.
Right.
Oh God. Yeah.
So how can people
talk about retirement? And I'm like, what is that?
Right. Exactly. How can people stay connected with you?
I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, I'm now on Instagram, which I thought I never would be. I finally figured that piece out. So there I am. And of course, my website, they can always go there.
I love it. And we'll make sure that we link everything on our website and then also in the comments so people can stay connected with you. Oh my goodness. This has been such a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
It's been fun.
So we will definitely be on the lookout for one of these, a number of different projects you have coming out. And thank you everyone who joined us tonight to hear this, to rewatch this conversation or to hear some of our other conversations. You can visit www.storiesofacolorfulworld.com. Join our newsletter to find out about new releases and places will be popping up in the community. So we actually have 2 events this weekend. This Saturday, I'll be in the Bronx New York at 221 Bruckner Boulevard from 3:30 to 7:30 for a Bronx pop-up. And Vanessa will be in Atlanta at Ponce City Market from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. We will both have plenty of books for sale and a few of our holiday bundles. So make sure you come and find us and see us in person if you want to get those early holiday bundles off your list. If not, you can pre-order them from the website. And also just make sure that you come to the website and check out our collection of books and pre-order
Yes.
the 19 Project. Go on and pre-order this book. This is a book that if you did not know that you needed this in your life, but you do. So make sure you go in and pre-order it. It is absolutely fabulous, from Nicole Hannah-Jones and Renee Watson, and illustrations by Nicholas Smith. Absolutely fabulous. Go ahead and pre-order yours today. And thank you again, Nikki, for joining us tonight. It has been such a pleasure.
Thank you.
All right, and we'll see everyone else next week. All right, have a good one.